Hey, hello everyone. So my name is Lovejot. I'm a clinical lab scientist, CLS. So thank you for the, club for inviting me to speak to you all, and I hope you get some good takeaways from this presentation. So I prepared a little PowerPoint for you guys. So let's get started. Is everyone able to hear me okay? Cool.
Yeah.
And are you able to see the full screen PowerPoint as well? Awesome. Okay, so let's begin. So here's the agenda for today. I'll just go briefly over what we're going to talk about. So first I'll begin with a little intro about myself. I'll get into my career journey after this, and I'll talk about the CLS job that I do, as well as the industry that I'm in, give you some insights on that. After this, we can talk about some advice I have for future students who want to be CLSs. Um, In addition to that, then we'll go do a lab tour. I have a little video prepped for that as well, so you can see the insides of a lab and how it works. And then we can, end this presentation with a Q&A for any questions that you might have. Okay, so about me, my name is Lovejot. There's a bunch of stuff after my name that's not my official name, but let's go over what all that means. So a BS, I got my BS at SJSU in microbiology, and then a chemistry minor. CLS, so that stands for Clinical Lab Scientist. And then CDPH is the California Public Health Department, which is one of our licensing agencies. And then MLS is Medical Lab Scientist, and I'm licensed as a Medical Lab Scientist by the ASCP. That's the American Society of Clinical Pathology. So I have two licenses, California license under CDPH and MLS license under ASCP. So basically, those licenses allow me to be a clinical scientist. So what is a clinical scientist? So there's a bunch of names for CLS. It could be MLS, CLL, or MT. MT is medical technologist. But basically, it's all the same. They perform diagnostic testing on blood and other body fluids in clinical labs. Whether that's in a hospital or a biotech, that's, up to the individual, but we're performing the lab testing. So whenever you think of where my sample is going to, it's going to the clinical scientist. So I discovered that I wanted to be a CLS back in 2015. That was when I was in high school still. The way I discovered it was kind of odd. I don't think it really happens to everyone, but I actually got a blood infection from a bacteria while I was traveling abroad. So got really sick, landed up in the hospital for about 2 weeks on antibiotics. And it was during that time that I asked a lot of questions like, what are you doing? Where are these blood samples going? And, just from my nurses and doctors, I discovered the lab because, you never really see the lab or talk about it. But, I was thankful to have discovered it that way. So I guess a near-death experience allowed me to learn about CLS, which is pretty cool. But I'm glad I did learn about it. And also that infection, got me really into microbiology, which is something I'm still interested in to this day. So here's the general outline career journey after I discovered I wanted to be a CLS. So I went straight to SJSU after high school because I wanted to pursue microbiology. As I said, it was a big interest of mine. And also I knew microbiology tied really well with CLS, which is something I did consider down the road. I wasn't exactly sure at this point what I wanted to do, but I think microbiology is always a good choice if you want to pursue CLS. So I graduated in 2019 with my BS in microbiology. And then after I graduated, I worked some. I applied to clinical industry jobs to get some experience. And at the same time, I was applying to the CLS program. Then I was accepted into the CLS program in 2021 and then graduated from the program in 2022. And then right now I'm working as a CLS ever since. And I'll go more in depth into this general outline in the next few slides. So my career journey. So the early day, of course, there was a lot of science classes. Um, Microbiology major for a reason. So I really recommend if you want to consider being a CLS, choose microbiology at San Jose State because it covers basically everything you really need as a prereq for CLS school, instead of having to take more outside classes. I did take a few summer classes. This helps me dilute my schedule, which I recommend for a lot of students. Science classes are really hard and tough to study for. And as a CLS student, you want to do really well, get those A's and B's if you can. So, I just took summer classes, so I would have to take less units during the actual fall and spring semesters. That helped me save some time to study more for the classes that, really mattered, like my upper division micro courses, as you can see on the right, micro 127, micro 140, pretty packed schedule. Besides doing your science classes like all of you are doing, there's a lot of extracurricular activities I did on the side as well that helped me with my CLS career journey. This is tutoring, peer mentoring. I did some research as well, did some internships, gardening. I'll talk about that later, and then CLS prep as well. So this is just the next few slides that I'll talk about. So while I'm taking my classes at SJSU, the extracurriculars I participated in that have really helped me to get to where I am today. So one of the first ones is tutoring and peer mentoring. So I worked for the College of Science actually while I was a student. I used to tutor all these subjects. I really suggest, tutoring or teaching because it's a great way to learn. When you're teaching, you're actually learning, and that leads to a lot more success because you'll remember these things for the long term and they'll come in use later in your later courses. And a big plus was the connections I made. Some of my strongest letters of recommendation come from the people I worked with and the colleagues I had in the College of Science. You know, it's kind of like being on the inside with the people that you're working with can get to where you want to be in the future. So if you, have time, you might as well consider applying to COSAC and becoming a tutor. It'll help you in the long term. You build great teamwork skills and it'll help you be a good student as well. So research labs, I also did participate in research labs while I was at SJSU. One of the first labs I started in while I was a freshman was Dr. Overnay's research lab. We worked on bacterial cloning, so using plasmids to insert genetic DNA into bacteria like E. coli to study proteins. We did sequencing as well and worked on antibiotic sensitivities. I recommend research labs. It's a great starting place to get lab skills because as a CLS, you'll be working in the lab all the time. You'll be on the bench. So if you can start early building those skills, how to be in a lab and how to be comfortable in the lab, it'll help you a lot in the long run. Though this is a research lab and it's very different from how a clinical lab works because of the samples you're working in, um, it's still good hands-on skills because there's a lot of similar tools and supplies and usages. In addition to Dr. Ovney's lab, I later worked in Dr. Rex research lab. So this is more environmental microbiology and sequencing that we worked on. Also great skills. I just always wanted to be in the lab because I loved being in the lab. That's something if you want to be a CLS, you have to be comfortable with. You have to be able to be in a lab and feel at home, because that is where you'll do all your work. So as a student right now, if you can get involved in research, I think it's a great opportunity. And I know the BSA has professors sometimes come out and talk about their research. So, you can always, reach out to a professor, shoot an email, go visit at one of these BSA meetings to learn more about how to get involved in research. And I think we have great research labs at San Jose State that you can learn a lot from. This is one of my posters. It was great working on this research that I did with Dr. Overnay. So we also partnered with some students, Kylie and William from this other school back in Gilroy. So we worked with Galvin College students and we did a research project over the summer. So another great way to, connect with other students from different college campuses. This a lot of research that we did, but the key takeaway is, getting involved in lab work. That's what really helped me hone some skills. We did PCR in this lab a lot, which I still do today in my work as a clinical lab scientist. We worked on antibiotic sensitivities, which you can see at the bottom where it says figure 3, which is, testing drugs against bacteria. So that's something we do in the labs as well in microbiology because we need to tell the doctor sometimes what are the drugs that are going to work on your patient. So these kind of skills really came in use later on, but it was a good opportunity to get started in it at the basic levels while doing your undergrad. So moving on, so while I'm doing my classes and intern research labs, I also did participate in a summer internship during one of my summers. I worked at this lab called Valley Water. It's a government lab here in Santa Clara. Essentially, they're a lab that tests all of the water in the whole Santa Clara Valley for microbes as well as chemical analysis. So I got to work with my fellow scientists. They're circled in that red circle with me standing in there as well. So I go to work with microbiologists and chemists. The microbiologists are making sure, of course, our water is free of microbes and they're adequate to drink. And the chemists are making sure, of course, that the water is chemically safe as well. This is a really good experience, and I highly suggest if you're considering a summer internship to apply to Valley Water. It's a paid internship, which is really nice too. And you get to work with SOPs, which are really important. So that's standard operating procedures, which are my life and livelihood as a CLS. So we get to use those every day. And then also LIMS. So that's Laboratory Information Management System. So that's something you will need to get very comfortable with because we manage a lot of laboratory data and information in these LIMS systems. So, being an intern at this lab really helped me get exposure to that. Besides also getting, of course, lab skills. Looks like, yeah, so they accepted 62 interns at that time, but the laboratory itself only took in 2 students. So that's 62 interns across all of their departments at the whole Valley Water. There's a lot of different internships you can do at Valley Water. The lab itself accepts 2 students from what I recall. But I would, consider just Googling Valley Water. It'll come right up, Valley Water internship. And then, if you're interested, I highly suggest applying. These are just some images from my lab days at Valley Water. Used to start quite early in the morning at like 7 because I like to be early. So there's a lot of nice sunsets and sunrises that I got to see as well because I used to work yeah, sunrise to sunset. But that's me, working in the lab, getting to work with lab equipment. That's a really good takeaway as well as a CLS. If you can get exposure to working with instruments early on in your career through an internship, you'll learn quite a lot. So, getting hands-on experiences with clinical instruments was really helpful. So another internship that I personally did not do, but some of my friends did do, and I can just bring this up just out of interest. The Santa Clara Public Health Lab has a lot of internships as well. So if you're interested, I do see that they're going to close their applications on March 8th. So maybe, consider applying to one of the clinical internships they have. I do see one right now for an immunization program internship. So that might be really interesting to get some, healthcare experience on your hands. It looks good on your CLS applications as well. And I know the clinical public health lab also sometimes has internship opportunities. So maybe just, Google Santa Clara Public Health internships and you will be able to see all of their internships on their websites. And these are paid from what I recall. One of my friends who was a fellow CLS student with me actually in my same program, she interned at the public health lab as well, just the year prior to getting into the CLS program herself. not totally clinically related, but as a San Jose State student, I think it's really important to get involved in things outside of just, being stuck in your science classes and, being at the science college all the time. This is something I participated in a lot. I went to with my friends from the other colleges to the campus community garden. So if you're interested in, meeting other students, learning about, other career paths, I suggest going here. Looks like they're gonna be open from this last month till May, and those are their days and times. I think it's a really good experience to, get out of the science classes, helps you relax and take your mind off things and just refreshed out in nature. You can take some fruit and vegetables home as well if you volunteer there. Um, this is an interesting place. I also met some other healthcare students as well that were, pursuing their doctorates later on, and also got to learn about, alternative career paths. You should always have options and ideas available to you just in case, because you never know what might work out or you might want to change your mind later on. If you just Google, I think, San Jose State Community Garden, you should be able to register on their website if you want to go volunteer. Okay, so now just back to the clinical aspects. So just reiterating, I've been taking my classes. I've been doing research in Dr. Rec and Overnay's lab and did some summer internships as well. So after all that, I did end up graduating with my BS. And after I graduated with my BS in 2019, my first inkling was to go get some clinical experience. So what I did is I actually waited to apply to the CLS program. I didn't apply right away. So instead, what I did is I got my first clinical experience. So I joined a lab called Natera. It's a biotech here in San Carlos, about 20, 30 minutes away from here. It's a biotech. They're mostly focused on genetic sequencing, but I secured a job as a CLA. A CLA is a clinical lab assistant. Um, and this is while, COVID is going on, so I was pretty thankful to get this opportunity. So as a CLA, it was really nice that I got to work alongside CLSs. So I was able to see how CLSs work. I was able to ask questions from them, make those connections again, while I'm still considering applying to the CLS program. So at this biotech, as my first job out of college, I was able to get hands-on experiences with clinical samples. So I got to work with patient blood, plasma, serum, and also I got to work on instruments. As you can see from the photo on the left, we worked on various instruments and platforms to sequence patient blood samples for DNA, extract DNA, and also, further testing down the line with our other teams. So as a fresh grad, that first job can make a big difference in what you do down the road. So I was thankful for this job because I was able to talk to a lot of CLSs and get their insights and also actually just see how CLSs work in the lab, which is really important in making that decision, like, do I want to do this myself as a long-term career? So as a new student, if you're considering, getting some clinical experience, as I highly suggest you do, working at a biotech is a great way to get your foot in the door, essentially. And Natera was the company I worked at to get my foot in the door. I built a lot of troubleshooting skills, which are really important as well for a CLS. When things go wrong, instruments break down, or samples, don't work out, you have to learn how to troubleshoot, which always comes in handy. And management in terms of your time, skills, and also I was able to get into management of the team itself as a lab lead. That was really helpful experiences as well. So again, I applied to this biotech. So I just worked there right after I graduated. So to get some clinical experience while the pandemic is going on in the background. While I'm working at the biotech, I also got a second job just to help out the community. The hospital was struggling because there were so many COVID samples and patients needing COVID testing. So they were asking for volunteers to help out at the hospital. And so I decided to work as a COVID extra help MLA, a medical lab assistant at the community hospital. So in this role, I just volunteered on my weekends to help CLSs process COVID samples. So that was very helpful to see how a hospital CLS setting works, as opposed to the biotech I was already working at. At the hospital, I got to work with instruments such as the Hologic Panther and GenExpert. These are two platforms the CLSs use for DNA sequencing to test for COVID samples. And also I got to learn how to, do critical calls, call out positive COVID patients. So it was those two clinical experiences that I think really helped boost my application when I, came to time to apply to CLS school. So here's my journey or outline right before CLS school. So I applied November of 2020 to SFSU, and then I applied to San Jose State in January of 2021. So around the winter time, I applied to two schools at the same time. This is while I was still working and volunteering at the community hospital. So I applied to SFSU and San Jose State. I did get into both, which I was thankful for. In the end, I did went with SJSU. It was closer to me in terms of where I lived, so a bit closer to me as how I wanted to train and where I wanted to be at a hospital. So I chose SCVMC, that's Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, as my training site, which was my top choice from San Jose State. When you're applying to CLS school, you do get to rank the hospitals you want to train at by your preference. So that was my preference, my first choice, and I decided to go with it. I began my program in August of 2021 as a CLS student at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. So while there, we rotated through all the departments. As a CLS student, you get to rotate through chemistry, hematology, blood bank, microbiology, and any other specialty areas that your hospital might have. It varies from hospital to hospital. But essentially, for a whole year, you'll be rotating through the various departments in the hospital. To the right in that photo are my fellow CLS interns. We had a pretty big class. So that's one of the benefits of working at Valley Medical Center. They have 12 students in a whole year. 6 students graduate every 6 months. So these are the 6 students that I interned with. And I still work with actually 3 of them. We're at the same hospital, which is really nice. So the structure at SJSU is a bit different from San Francisco State, which is another reason why I went to San Jose State. So at San Jose State, as a CLS student, you'll have your lectures on Mondays, and then you rotate through the lab at the hospital from Tuesday to Friday. And in between every weekend, you'll have lab exams and you'll have lecture exams due. San Francisco State does it a bit different, where like, you'll have all of your classes for the first 4 months all together with all of your exams. After that, you're done with your classes and you will have no classes and you'll just be rotating at your hospital for the rest of the year. I thought that was too condensed and cramped for me in terms of lectures, so I decided San Jose State was still the best option for me because your classes are spread throughout the year on Mondays. Just personal preferences, a few differences between the two schools. So yeah, I started my program as a CLS intern in August of 2021. Then I graduated the following year in August of 2022. Tip, whenever taking your board exams, take them the next day as soon as you can. I just graduated on the 26th and I took my board exams the next day because delaying just makes you forget things you've learned and just cause more anxiety. Whenever you have the opportunity in your life, just go all in and just do it right away if you prepped and you've studied hard for the whole year. So yeah, I graduated, got my license August of 2022. And then I landed my first job. So that's me standing here at one of my current hospitals where I work in the blood bank, which is also called transfusion services or immunohematology. So after I graduated in 2022, I got my first job as a CLS at El Camino Health. This is a hospital in Mountain View. I'm working there as a generalist CLS. So I say generalist CLS because as a CLS, you can choose to specialize later on in a specific subject like microbiology or hematology. But as a fresh graduate from California, you're always going to be graduating as a generalist. So you can work in any department. So in blood bank, I do various testing. So most commonly, we're testing for, of course, the patient's blood type. So are they ABO? And if they're ABO positive or negative, so that's the RH type. Working in blood bank, we also get to prep products like FFP, that's fresh frozen plasma. So we get to thaw plasma for patients that need plasma. ABID, so that's antibody identification. So sometimes, patients have antibodies in their blood that are going to interfere with transfusions they need. So we work on ABIDs, and we work on ABIDs so that we can do XM, which is a cross match. So we can find compatible blood for our patients. So these are just some of the tests I do working in blood bank. El Camino Health, I also work in the microbiology department at the same time. So here we process blood cultures. Sometimes patients get blood infections. We test for the organisms growing in their blood, make gram stains so we can get a visual of what's growing, report this to the doctors, prep cultures, perform PCRs, etc. So this is my first job as a CLS, freshly out of CLS school. I did do a brief job change, so I did end up going back to SCVMC, Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, my training hospital. I didn't apply to SCVMC right away after I graduated because they didn't have an opening that I was interested in. I really wanted to work in the microbiology department, and there was no opening for a microbiology CLS, so that's why I had ended up going to El Camino Health. But there was a micro CLS position that opened up, and I did end up going back to Valley Medical Center. But I do still work at El Camino Health on the side in their blood bank department whenever they need help. So I'm still working at two hospitals. But Valley Medical Center is my main job, which I'm doing microbiology at. So at Valley Medical Center, I'm in the microbiology department working in virology as well as molecular microbiology. So we work on things like syphilis, H. pylori, viruses of all sorts, like RSV, coronavirus. Valley Medical Center is a much larger hospital than El Camino Health, so I do get a lot of diverse experiences, which is something to consider once you're a CLS, of course, down the road. Do you want to work at a big, level one trauma center like Valley Medical Center is, or do you want to work at a smaller setting? I'll talk about like the benefits of, CLS. There's a lot of flexibility over where you can work at as a CLS. But yeah, right now I'm back at Valley Medical Center, but helping with the blood bank at El Camino Health on the side. Right here on the left, you see some reagents. These are just common blood typing reagents we use in blood bank, just to quickly test the patient's blood and plasma to figure out if they're ABO and if they're ABO positive or negative. And usually we keep them on ice. That's a requirement to keep them cool. So yeah, as I was saying, let me talk about some of the pros and cons. That's me on the left in the microbiology department at El Camino Health. Um, I was there last night actually, working, so that was pretty fun. So some of the pros for being a CLS. There's stability. I would say working in healthcare, that's one of the big benefits. We hear nowadays of a lot of layoffs in the industry from tech specifically. So that's a really nice thing about being in healthcare. There's a big stability of this job. We need people to be able to take care of other people. So that's something I'm very thankful for. Flexibility. So I was mentioning earlier, there is flexibility in terms of, when you work. For me specifically, for example, I don't like working a typical nine to five setting. So as a CLS, I'm able to work alternative shifts. So as I was saying, I was working at El Camino Health last night. So sometimes I work overnight at a hospital, so you can work as a night shifter. You can work in your evenings as well if you choose. Sometimes, you can work between 3 p.m. and 11 p.m. That's one of my favorite times to work. Um, because it opens up your day. You can do stuff during the day, which is really nice. So as a CLS, if you choose this as your career, there is a lot of flexibility in terms of what shift and time you can work at, since, as a hospital, you're open 24/7 and you need to be open 24/7. Benefits. I love the benefits of being a CLS because, you're in healthcare, so the hospital, takes care of the CLS, good compensation as well, which I think is a pro. Engagement and learning. It's one of my favorite things. So as a CLS, I get to engage in my environment. I get to move around, so that's mobility. I don't like to sit around a lot, so it's really nice to be able to manipulate my environment, walk around, engage with other CLSs as well, because we always communicate as well. Get, insight, ask questions if there's questionable test results, etc. Another pro is stress. I know it sounds a bit odd putting stress as a pro, but I'm talking about good stress as opposed to a con being bad stress. Good stress for a pro is, it keeps you mentally engaged. You're stressed positively about the life of your patients. You're caring for your patients. It helps you stay alert. It's not something I would say as bad stress, which is like, you're just mentally exhausted or drained or, in a negative environment. There is a difference between, good stress and bad stress. And I think a CLS gives you good stress for a lot of the times. Environment. So I love working in the lab environment. Though I'm giving this presentation, I'm actually quite introverted. So I like to be quiet and keep to myself a bit. So a lab is a really big place for us introverts, since you don't really deal with patients face to face. You're just dealing with sample tubes and containers and just, doing your hands-on work. So I really like that, kind of environment. Of course, you have your colleagues you get to work with every day to day, so I'm always thankful for them, but I do enjoy the lab environment. I personally can't see myself working on the hospital floors as a nurse or a doctor. It's not something for me. So a pro can be the environment of a CLS. You're working in the lab. And of course, it's I think a big pro is just working in healthcare. You're caring for other human beings, which is a big thing if you want to be a CLS. So on to cons. As I said, there can be bad stress. Sometimes you can feel burnt out. Healthcare is a big, stressful job. If you're not very invested in your career and you're not interested in this, you might feel a lot of negative stress because you feel overburdened and stressed out from the work you're having to do. So just, be careful and just be aware that this is something that you kind of give your all to. So if you really want to be a CLS, you should be interested in lab. You should be interested in healthcare. Um, hazards, of course, being in, the lab, you are exposed to blood and other bodily fluids. So that is a hazard that you can think of. But we're very good with wearing protective equipment. We wear gloves. We work behind hoods, so there's a glass shield protecting me. Um, and we have lab coats and also wear masks as well. But it's something to consider. You are exposed to chemicals and other hazards, so you do have to be careful. Cons can be a shift. So shifts, as I'm referring to, is like shift work. So you can work during the day, which is called day shift. You can work during the evenings, which is called PMs or evening shift, or you can work nights, or midnight shifts. So for some people, that can be a con if they're stuck in a shift they're not willing to be in. I personally love working the evening and night shifts. I don't really like to work during the days. But this can be a con if you prefer that 9 to 5 setting. But there are, a lot of, I said, flexibility and options out there for a CLS. So you will be able to, end up getting something that you probably like. The environment can be a con as well. So if you're not okay being stuck in the lab all the time, so it might not be for you because this will be your job, going from bench to bench to bench, looking at various patient samples. It's a very routine, and it can be repetitive sometimes as well. So that is something you have to look forward to. And of course, the big con is taxes. Oh gosh. So as a CLS, you'll end up paying more taxes because of, you're making bigger money, bigger taxes. We'll talk about money transparency later on, which I think is important in today's society. So as a fresh CLS, I did want to bring up, money transparency. So as a fresh CLS, you can expect to be making around this range highlighted in the red box, and that's very accurate to what I consider what my friends and I make. Of course, there's a lot of room for growth as well, but the big point I want to make is don't get into CLS or healthcare for the money because you will burn out. You need to be first interested in this career path and the subject matter and what you're doing. Actually, you have to be passionate about the sciences because the money will not make you passionate. It's not going to work out. But, it is good to know roughly what you'll be making as a fresh grad. And then, as I said earlier, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do as a CLS. So clinical lab scientists can go in all of these directions. So remember I said I started in biotech as one of my first jobs as a lab assistant. There's a lot of CLSs that also work in biotech. Um, so that's one way you can go. You can also go into the hospital setting, which is probably the biggest setting where CLSs work at, which is what I do right now. So as a CLS in a hospital setting, you can work in all of these different departments. So of course you can later on specialize in one of these departments if you want to, or you can just be a generalist if you want. Another cool thing is like you can be a CLS for a while and then later transition out of the lab. If you want to transition out of the lab in a hospital, you can be in healthcare administration, which is really cool. So, management in the lab. So you will be off the benches in that setting. And there's a lot of other professional settings in this whole slide, which you can, review later. But the general takeaway is, as a CLS, you have a lot of open doors to you and where you can work at. You can go out of the hospital if you want. You can move around to a biotech or a company if you want. A lot of my friends don't work at hospitals, they work at biotechs. In the Bay Area, we're lucky to have a lot of biotechs. Um, so that's always good open door. At biotech, the most of the work you'll do is more related to DNA and sequencing, not these subject matters. So you'll be mostly dealing with PCRs and testing for DNA. But it's good to have options, which CLS will open a lot of options for where you can work at. In terms of your outlook for a CLS, there's projected to be about a 7% growth in the CLS industry by 2030. So it's still a growing career industry. A lot of our fellow CLSs are retiring because they're baby boomers. But also the future, we see a lot more type 2 diabetes. We're seeing a lot more viruses and bacteriological infections. We just had a pandemic a couple of years ago. So there's a big need for CLSs to do that lab testing. Prenatal testing. So as I was saying earlier, that's a big testing industry at the biotech. So remember I used to work at Natera. So Natera actually does prenatal testing, which is DNA sequencing on maternal samples to just figure out, what's going on with the baby and if it's healthy and if there's any, potential diseases that might be passed on to your uh, offspring. So again, if you're working in biotech, a lot of the big trends in biotech are prenatal testing. So as a CLS, you have a lot of open opportunities and there's a lot of need for this profession. Um, so it's a good field to be in. There's a lot of growth as well. And I know the San Jose State program is also trying, and they did recently expand the number of students they're taking, and they're always trying to take more students because there's a lot of needs at the hospitals for CLS, especially new hires and new grads. So how is the industry evolving? So let's talk about this a little bit. So the bigger trends are we need greater efficiency through automation. There's so many samples, the volume is so high nowadays because so many patients need that healthcare and help. So we're trying to use AI and automation to help, become more efficient by helping us sort, label, barcode, decap samples, and all clock them. This helps take away a lot of our, repetitive nuance work that we need to do so that we can, focus on the actual work, which is the clinical aspects, analyzing data, performing the testing, and reporting results to doctors. So the use of artificial intelligence, currently we are using AI in the chemistry labs to help test for and look out for patient data in chemistry tests. So AI is able to actually analyze a big volume of data, which would take forever for a CLS to, manually analyze. So that's a big help for AI to, help us precisely look out for patterns in patients and see what their trends are. How was their healthcare data from a few years ago when they came to our hospital to how it is right now? So this is something really useful in the chemistry labs. So this helps us, prevent inaccurate and inconsistent results because we're able to compare results for that same patient over a period of time and keep looking at what is that patient's, basic metabolic levels to their criticals. What's different from the last time they came. This helps us process a large volume of data, helps us get rid of, time-consuming tasks that are not really clinically related, helps us there's limited expertise, meaning so by using AI, we have to train less in those aspects that are wasting our time. So we can rely on the AI to analyze large data so that we can focus on our needs and our actual job duties. And in the end, this helps us with cost and resources that we have to use. So in the end, we are using AI in the industry. It's not a replacement, but what it's doing right now is actually it's helping us be more efficient. It's helping fill in gaps due to human limitations. Just imagine one CLS sitting in front of a computer just analyzing data all day. It would take forever to get through that many patients. So by using the technology, we're able to be more efficient and able to analyze large data. So now the big points that I want to make as future CLS students, since you do want advice, you want to be a competitive student. I know a lot of applicants apply to these programs. Usually upwards of 400 students apply every cycle. And I know the acceptance rate is usually, around 10% of those students end up making it. So it can be pretty intimidating, but there are certain ways and steps you can take to be an outstanding student and applicant. So I highly suggest getting really good grades. As I said earlier, get involved in tutoring or teaching or, collaborate with your fellow students. Those solid grades will help out in the long term. And it makes you one of the strongest candidates because your GPA does matter for this CLS internship. And that's just something I'm gonna be open and honest about. It does matter. So, work hard, study hard, and use your resources. A big thing that, a lot of students don't do is get to know your professors and bosses along the way because you will need those strong letters of recommendation. As I said, I was, a tutor at the College of Science. One of my letters of recommendation that was one of my strongest came from my boss at the College of Science. I was doing research with, Dr. Reck. Dr. Reck wrote one of my letters of recommendation. So things like that. Get involved, but also get to know your professors. And your professors are always happy to go get a cup of coffee. I still grab a cup of coffee sometimes with my professors, even to this day, even as a CLS after I graduated. You don't have to, be constantly, keeping in touch with the professors, but it's good to know that they know who you are and they remember who you are. And you can always talk about your future goals with them if you go to office hours too. I remember I used to talk about, my future goals of being a CLS and, what their insights and recommendations were. So, now is the time to get to know your professors and have them get to know you as well. And, you let them know that you're interested in becoming a CLS and, they're aware of, students needing letters of recommendation too. So don't be shy. Get lab experience. So I think that is super important. You can be a phlebotomist. That's a great way to get clinical experience. I do know a couple of students that graduated with me who were phlebotomists. But if you're not looking into becoming a phlebotomist or if that's difficult out of reach, you can also do what I did, which is I became a clinical lab assistant as a job in the industry at a biotech. So, after you graduate, go get a CLA job and get some experience for a year or so while you're applying to become a CLS intern. And then research, while you're at SJSU, get some research experience because that is lab experience and it counts. You are in the labs. And of course, I mentioned a few internships. Consider we're doing a summer internship. But basically, what it sums up to is get as much lab experience as you can, and even better if it's clinical experience, whether at a hospital, at a biotech, as a phlebotomist. And then going on to the actual, application to the schools. So I highly suggest applying to as many schools as you can. As I said, it's a highly competitive field. So, applying to all of the schools would, of course, increase your chances. These are the schools that you can apply to that I'm aware of. There are a few more schools that I did not list just because they accept very few students. But there's Loma Linda. This is a private school in SoCal, so it's not like a public school like every other CLS school, but this is a private school you can consider as well for CLS. I do believe they do a CLS program that is 2 years long, not 1 year long. So some of the public schools, there's UC Irvine, they have a CLS program, as well as San Francisco State. UC San Francisco has a really new CLS program as well, and then San Jose State. The ones in red accept the most amount of students. So of course that increases your chances, but I highly suggest applying to all of them if you can. Um, and then of course there's other options outside of state. So, if you're considering going out of state, you can always come back as a CLS to California, but you can, do your studies and get your license out of state and then come back later. Quite a few of my friends that chose this route went to Michigan to get their CLS license and then ended up returning to California. And again, I said you can apply up to 3 times to the school in case you don't get in the first time. And don't give up hope. Apply all 3 times. I've had friends who've applied 3 times and they got in their last time. The schools do keep track of how many times you applied into their consideration. Just because, let's say one cycle you applied and you didn't get in just because, they're garnering how competitive you are versus your fellow classmates. You might end up being more competitive in a different cycle. It doesn't, even if you're applying with the exact same stats, it just varies from cycle to cycle. But, don't give up hope. And you can apply every 6 months because most of these schools accept students every 6 months. And then there is an alternative career path, of course. So, I'm a CLS, which I already really talked about. We're working mostly in the hospital setting, but San Jose State also has a CGMBS program. So if you want to collect and consider the molecular route. You can become a CGMBS, which is similar to a CLS, but you're only working in molecular labs. So you're working only with DNA and molecular testing. So I highly consider, looking into San Jose State's CGMBS website to see if you're interested in that. And I think if you're a molecular student at San Jose State and a microbiology student at SJSU, you probably have a lot of similar classes that are prereqs for the CGMBS program. Some of my friends are CGMBSs as well, and they work in biotechs right now. Most of the biotechs, yeah, have CGMBSs, though as a CLS, you can work at a biotech too. So, that's another alternative route you can consider. So I did have a lab tour that I wanted to show you guys that you might have, and so you can also, of course, connect with me. That's my email, and that's a QR code for connecting with me on LinkedIn. But yeah, I'll open up to any questions.
That was so cool. Thank you so much. That was really, really awesome to see the whole behind the scenes of the lab that you work at. I always wondered kind of
Hmm.
what a larger lab looks like that. And it was a little different than I expected. Some things were the
Yeah.
same that I imagined, but overall, that was really, really eye-opening. And also the rest of your presentation was really in-depth and just answered so many questions. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And yeah, just to, be open and honest, the lab that you just saw was actually one of the smaller labs. That's El Camino Health that I worked at.
Wow.
The other hospital, my actual job at Valley Medical Center is, I would say, about 4 to 5 times bigger than that.
Wow.
Their microbiology department at Valley Medical Center is about the size of the entire lab you just saw in the video. So again, it, varies. El Camino Health is about a 400 bed hospital, whereas Valley Medical Center is about a 900 bed hospital. But there's a lot of other satellite sites and other community sites they have. So, that is a difference to consider also. Do you want to work at a smaller hospital or a bigger hospital? So it's just, there's a lot of options and opportunities. Usually, if you're working at a smaller hospital like El Camino Health, you can be a generalist. You can work in all four departments as a CLS. Whereas at a large hospital like Valley Medical Center, the most amount of departments one CLS can work in is two. So I can work in like hematology and chemistry at the same time. Um, or be trained to work in two departments is what I'm not saying. You're not going to be working at the same two departments at the same day, but you rotate which department you're going to work in. But a larger hospital, usually you're more specialized compared to a smaller hospital, where different day, a different time, you might work in microbiology one day, you might work in chemistry another day, which is something to consider later on as well. But yeah,
Well, I do have a few questions, but I wanted to
sure.
let others ask their questions before I asked mine. So,
Yeah, sure.
um,
I think you briefly mentioned this in your presentation, but what are your hours looking like on a typical day?
Sure. So we're typically, yeah, working like a normal, 8-hour job. So I personally like to work, as I said, during evenings and nights. So for example, if I'm working evenings, so usually when I'm working at El Camino Health, I like to work during the evening time. So that's between 3, 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. personally. And at Valley Medical Center, I like to work during the night. So I chose the night shift there, meaning I work between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Personally, that's what I really like and I really enjoy. But of course, if you're working during the day, you can do that as well. So that's typically between 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., something like that. But I work in the evenings and nights. Night shift is something I think everyone should try. A lot of people are scared of it, like, oh no, working during the night, sleeping during the day, how's it gonna work out? It's not for everyone, but it is for some people like me. Um, the reason why I like that is because if I'm working during the night, it opens up my evenings and mornings to me. I can do whatever I want in the mornings after work. So I'm, free during that time as well. And I'm free in the evenings too, before I even go to work. Whereas if you're working all day, right? Your mornings, you're preparing to go to work, and then you only have your evenings to yourself, and you're usually too tired by that time. So I like night shift personally just because it opens up a lot of my personal time to do what I want outside of work. So that was a good question. You, as a CLS, you have a lot of options of what times you want to work at. Any other questions?
I just had a comment. The
Yes.
LinkedIn that you put is not working.
Oh, really? Okay, let me try real quick.
Yeah.
Did it take you to what are you seeing when you scanned it?
I'm seeing this.
Not
It
sure.
says the QR code campaign has been disabled for some reason.
Oh, that's weird, but there's a few other students that were able to, like I see some other
Uh,
connection requests. So I'm not sure. But if you just, Google or LinkedIn my name, you should be able to see it. But I am seeing some LinkedIn requests from other students, so I'm not really sure why that is. But yeah, you can just Google my name or on LinkedIn or just look up Lovejot Singh. Singh is my last name, just as it shows on here on Zoom. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for asking. Sorry about that. Any other questions?
See Rosa's hands up, but I can't hear anything.
Hello? I couldn't hear what you just said.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so how does financial aid help you with the program, or do you just have to pay out of pocket?
So, um, as a student for financial aid, you won't be able to apply to financial aid for the CLS program, but most programs actually pay a stipend to you as a student to work at their hospital. So in the end, actually, the tuition I had to pay was less than the money they gave me to be his CLS intern. So essentially, my tuition was kind of paid off by the hospital, stipend that I was getting. And the
Oh,
stipend amount that the hospitals are paying you for being a CLS intern varies from hospital to hospital, but not all hospitals give stipends too. So that's something you should consider when you're applying to be a CLS student. Look at the hospitals you're choosing to be your first choices and just see if those hospitals give stipends.
okay, and that pays for the whole year while you're still um a student, and then
Uh,
after you take your boards exam.
That amount would cover like how much you would have to pay in tuition. But the thing is, stipends are given month to month. So I guess if you're taking classes, let's say in the fall, your tuition is due at that time. So you probably will have to pay it out of pocket, let's say, but you'll end up getting more of it back as you earn your stipends over the rest of the year, is what I'm saying. So the amount you earn from your stipends is usually more than the amount that's due for the tuition. And I think the tuition at San Jose State in total was about $13,000 for the whole program. It's about 4 to 5K per semester, from what I recall when I took it. But yeah, do look into like stipends at the hospitals you're training at.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And Israel, were
Oh
you
yeah,
able to find my name on?
yeah. I
Okay,
looked.
perfect.
I googled your name because
Perfect.
I wasn't. I was also not finding it on LinkedIn. I was finding some other people named Lovejot
Okay.
Singh,
Yeah, I'll
but
have like I'll share my details with the club members as well so they can, put that in the in the shared recording of this PowerPoint presentation as well.
Okay, I had a question. I hope this isn't too personal, but I was wondering how your interview process was like when you applied for the program.
No, that's a really good question because yeah, interview is a really big part of your selection criteria. So San Francisco actually has two interviews, which is a lot more than San Jose State. So at San Francisco State, I interviewed with the people at the CLS program, so the actual, coordinators and people who run the program. And then after they went through their selection, you interview at the hospitals that you will be training at. So San Francisco had more interviews than San Jose State, which I only had one interview at San Jose State, which is from the hospitals itself. So usually how that works is, let's say you got into the program, you go and, interview at the hospitals you want to interview at, the ones you chose that you want as your clinical sites. And typically, the hospitals give you a tour, and after the tour, they'll interview you. So for me personally, I had a one-on-one with one of the coordinators at the hospitals. They just sat me down. They had like, the questions prepped for me, and they just asked like, why do I want to be a CLS? Why did you choose their hospital? Like, why do you want to come work at their hospital? They talked about, what do you know about their hospital? A big tip I give to all of you is go look up these hospitals and their websites. Read up about some of the history and how these hospitals are involved in the community, what they're doing to help the community. Because you can, bring that up during your interview, and it looks pretty impressive that you know about their hospital, as opposed to just coming up to the hospital unaware of what's going on. So that's something I did when I was interviewing. I would just look up the hospital's website and read up about their current events. And opposed to that, the interviews are pretty straightforward. I would say it's just general basic questions they're asking. Besides San Francisco, so San Francisco has a practical portion for their interviews where they're asking you to do some basic math and calculations, um, which is a bit awkward because we did it virtually. They had a virtual practical portion. I'm not sure if it's still virtual, but it might be in person. But as long as you're able to do some basic math and calculations, you should be fine. Does that answer your question, Talisa?
Yeah, that answers my question. I think
Yeah,
when I was talking
mhm.
to other people, they were saying that they also had like really weird questions. I was also wondering if you had really weird questions.
Weird questions.
Um, like for
Do you have an
example,
example? Yeah.
like if you're a hunter or gatherer, I think that was like one of the questions.
Oh. Um. Again, I that questions I'm not too sure. Maybe the weird questions came after COVID. Um. So I guess if you're a hunter or gatherer, I think they're just trying to get to see like, are you someone who looks for clues when you're, getting your data and analysis, or or do you just, deal with problems head on like a hunter? I don't think that's a really important clinical question, and I wouldn't overthink about that. The interviews, personally, I'm thinking they're looking at what your personality is. Uh, it's not very big on the answers you give. It's more about how you're behaving and answering those questions. Are you able to stay calm and coherent and give some sort of answer? It doesn't necessarily always have to be the right answer. But if I'll go back and then look at the interview questions if I can recall what I had from 2 years ago, and I'll try to get back to you on that. But for the most part, yeah, that kind of question, I wouldn't worry too much about. It's a weird question. I think they're just trying to get to know you as a personal level.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I did have another question.
Yeah.
How long did your process take from when you graduated from SJSU to where you are now?
I would say it took about a year and a half to 2 years. So I graduated from San Jose State, and then instead of applying to CLS school right away, I went to work to get some clinical experience. And then while I was working, I applied to CLS school. And I got in my first time to San Francisco State and San Jose State. So I didn't have to reapply, which I was thankful for. But it took about a year and a half to, I guess you could almost say 2 years just to be safe. Oh, another tip I can give for interviews is try to make it like a story if you can, related to your life, related to an experience. For example, for me, during the interview, I related how I got into CLS. I got sick, you know. I had a blood infection and how that got interested me in microbiology and how I pursued my microbiology passion and how that passion led to CLS. If you can relate your experiences to your skills, make it a story, that really helps during your interviews. That way it's not like just question, answer, question, answer. Try to, see if you can make your interviews more into a conversation as opposed to just a Q&A. That really makes you stand out from the other students and helps you, stand out to the people interviewing you. Because that way they'll remember you really well. Any other questions?
I just had one more question.
Sure.
Is in order for you to become a CLS, do you
Yes.
need to major in microbiology, or can I, like me, for example, I am a bio major, just like a general bio, and like I'm wondering if I have an opportunity to still like pursue that field in that career.
No, that's a good question. So you don't need to be a microbiology major. You can be a general bio major, but all you really need is to take the exact prerequisite classes and qualifications listed on the CLS website to whatever school you're applying to. As long as you have those classes and prereqs, you're good to apply. I'm just suggesting micro as a major because it covers most of those classes automatically as your major classes. You wouldn't have to, go out and pick those classes for CLS specifically. That's the only difference. And even more, I suggest, go talk to your career counselors and College of Science counselors. They'll be able to advise you as well. But you don't need to be a micro major to become a CLS. Any other questions?
I did have a question for you.
Sure.
For any students that are wanting to go through a CLS training program, how do you recommend studying for the licensing exam? And did you
Oh, so,
study consistently for the exam throughout the training period?
good question. So I would say your training program is your studying program. Your whole program is preparing you for that license and board exams. So there's no like separate studying I have to do just for the board exams. All your lectures, all your rotations at the hospital are preparing you for your board exams. And that's why I took my board exams right the next day I graduated. Because I knew I was ready. There's no other extra work I would need to do. You'll have all the materials you need to pass your exams from the lectures and materials and rotations you're doing as a CLS intern. But the important thing is, of course, study and do what you're told to study in the program. They'll give you all the materials, but it's of course up to you to study those materials, learn those lectures well, and do put in the work, of course.
And would you say, as far as how challenging the program is
Mhm.
academically, was it very challenging, or was that because of time constraints with having to be at the clinical site for 4 days a week?
So yeah, I would say the CLS program is basically like having a full-time job and having to study outside of that job while having a full-time job. So consider your rotations at the hospital being the job and you're still studying outside of that. So it is very challenging and you need to be able to manage your time, but it's not like impossible. It's meant to be stressful, it's meant to be rigorous because there is a lot to learn and it's just 1 year long. You don't have time to, relax and play around. Every weekend, I had a lecture exam due from the San Jose State lectures that I would have on Monday. So you would have lecture on Monday, and then the following Sunday, your exam is due. So you have that whole week, outside of your rotations to study and prepare for that lecture exam. And then at your rotations at the hospitals, you have quizzes as well that the hospital is giving you. These quizzes are outside of the ones you're required to take from San Jose State lectures. So there's a lot of things to study and learn, but it's doable. You just have to be learning constantly and just have good study habits. It's not impossible, but it is challenging and rigorous because you have to learn all this stuff and then also remember it and then be prepared to take your board exams. But it's a really good program because if you look at the statistics, the graduation and pass rate is almost 100%. I would say the biggest challenge is just getting into the program. Once you're in, just study hard and you'll pass. You'll be fine.
And then I was curious, what is it about Santa Clara Valley Medical Center that made you want to work there so much that to the point where you were waiting for a position to open there so you could return?
Yeah, Santa Clara is a really great hospital. Again, I said it's a 900-bed hospital. It's a level 1 trauma center, meaning any major traumas go to that hospital as well. So because it's such a big hospital, there's so much to learn and experience. We do all of our testing in the labs. We don't send it to other hospitals or labs to test out. So being at a Valley Medical Center, there's so much room to grow and learn. That's something I really loved. And again, I told in the presentation early on, I love microbiology. And Santa Clara has a huge microbiology department and lab. That was another reason I wanted to be there. But besides that, I really wanted to work for the county. It was something I was, passionate about, giving back to my community. And also I just wanted to be there because, that's where I was as a student, graduated from there. So it was nice to, work along the CLSs that, taught and trained me. So, and I find that a lot across all hospitals. Most interns end up working for the hospital they graduate from. Any other questions?
Wait, so you talked about stipends, but do
Yeah.
you also get paid by the hospital to work there or no?
The stipend is the pay from the hospital. So the stipend is like a fixed amount they're giving to their interns every month for being a part of their CLS program. And then again, not all hospitals do this, but the majority do. So of course, look into which hospitals are doing it. Well, I think I'll end the presentation here.